I'm going to start today with just some very basic examples about what caused me to just have this workshop and also what I've been doing. I'll start like with a caveat that everything that I'm talking about here might work for your class. I don't think that anything is a magic bullet. Everything is context specific. There are things that I'm doing this semester that are solely about the pandemic and getting through each class meeting and trying to have a good class meeting, and not whether I'm not thinking about things as, is this sustainable for next spring? I think I have been in the past. Everything I do, I keep records so that I can use it again or use it in some fashion. And I want to say some of this stuff that I'm thinking of this time is, at least with Slack, is ephemeral and might not be useful in the future. All right, so I use both of these as an alternative to Zoom and as complements to Zoom. I use them asynchronously and synchronously. And so I'll just go ahead and tell you some features about both, and then we'll have some time to sort of play around in them. To start, part of why I started using Slack in class, this is the first semester I've used it, has to do with my course planning over the summer. I had been thinking a lot about Zoom as something that was really great at first, but was also crushing my computer. And because I felt like it was kind of ruining my machine, I started to think maybe there are some good arguments to be made about having asynchronous classes where I'm not always using Zoom. And so I turned to this guy, Mike Caulfield, who I follow on Twitter, and I trust him a lot. And he talked about the virtues of asynchronous learning, and specifically about the digital divide and the kinds of inequities that exist with students and their bandwidth. And one of the things he talked about was the difference between a student downloading a Zoom recording and how much that actually took from their household bandwidth versus having their camera on in an asynchronous class. And he also mentioned that if they're at home, they're also with other people who are at home and using the same bandwidth. And that really stuck with me. I knew that Zoom was kind of making my personal laptop not run very well. And there's all sorts of things about a Zoom meeting that I think we're all well aware of now. There are some things that are just awful about it. And then there are a lot of things that are great. I didn't want to get rid of it entirely, but I didn't want to rely on it. And so rather than think about what I could do asynchronously, it actually prompted me to think about what I could do synchronously without Zoom. And so that's where I turned to Slack. I'd used Slack, I think probably, I can't remember exactly when this was, but 4 years ago maybe. I was working with 2 other people to write an electronic textbook. And in order to write this textbook, we had kind of agreed to crowdsource it. So you can see all those names at the bottom, the contributing authors. We wanted to work with all of these people to make our textbook, but we had been using Google Docs to write and draft some of the material, but we realized pretty quickly that there was really no good way to talk to each other. Those people in that list are at universities across 3 different countries and different time zones, and we just felt like it wasn't working out to email, and so we started using Slack for that. So I used Slack with colleagues before I ever used it for teaching. And then I started using it, and I saw somebody else in the chat also uses it with their friends. And so I started to use it kind of as social media, a more private version of Twitter, so I could have conversations I wanted with very specific people. And that's the thing that got me to think about it as something that was great for synchronous and asynchronous conversations. So I decided that I would set up a Slack for my class, which is an honors college seminar, and it has now it has 19 students in it. And the things that make it great, I think, is that it's really dynamic and flexible when you set it up. You have a lot of, you can see to the left, those are all the channels I use in my class for discussion. Those are easy to change. I felt like Blackboard's discussion board was really cumbersome. Just to make a discussion board, you have to go through several steps and click a bunch of stuff. I also liked it because it felt intimate to talk to people on it. It's also a familiar environment because it looks like social media. And, you know, generationally, for some people, they are more comfortable in the social media environments. I think our students are used to it. And again, this makes it a little more appealing to students than the discussion board, which is to me very static. It feels like a chore to post things there. It feels like a chore to read things that are posted there. Whereas Slack just felt like I was chatting. Part of why it's so good is that it's immediate. You can actually see when somebody is typing and you can see their name pop up. So you know somebody is online at the same time as you, and you can actually participate in a conversation in real time. It's also ongoing. And so if somebody posts something, unlike a text message, which you have to kind of scroll to find, you can revisit it and find something that someone posted 3 hours before. And do so in a way that's organized. And this also makes it superior to something like GroupMe or any kind of text function that is chronologically based, because again, you always have to scroll back to what came earlier. Whereas on Slack, there is some scrolling, but you can find things because there's a search window, and also because those conversations get organized in threads. So those are some of the main virtues, and I can show you examples of each. For the dynamic and flexible setup, so here's an example. This is in my channel on my Shakespeare Slack for Gertrude. We're reading Hamlet right now. And in order to create any new channel, you would just click that button. So rather than do a discussion board where you have to set up, you know, you write the title of the discussion board and then you write what the purpose is and then you write the question for the discussion board, I just click that plus and then I get to set up a channel. That's it. It's just one step. The other thing about the channels is that when you feel like you're done talking about one thing, you can change the name of the channel and the material doesn't go away, but the purpose of it does. The purpose of it shifts. So I renamed my Desdemona channel Gertrude when we finished doing Othello and moved to Hamlet. And rather than create a new place or a new thing, I just changed the name and it's easy to find. The other thing I think that speaks to the flexible setup is you can post different kinds of media there. You could post pictures as a prompt in addition to writing text. And you can do that with Blackboard discussion boards too, but again, it's so many more steps to do it. I mentioned the intimate and familiar environment, and part of what makes Slack appealing, I think, is that it integrates lots of different kinds of media. So it will unfold things like if you post a tweet, for instance, it will put the tweet in your post as a live thing. So if somebody wanted to go to Twitter, they could click on the link. But unlike Blackboard, if you're just posting a link, you don't actually have to go to Twitter. You can see everything that I want you to see inside Slack. So I'm not driving them into a sort of external world. I'm letting that external world come into my environment in a limited way. So I wanted them to see these gloves because they depict a hunting scene that looks like what happens in Venus and Adonis. And so there I have that object without having students go to Twitter.
Does it matter in terms of file size? You can just upload any size?
There are limits to how much you can upload over time for the free version. But I have not run into that at all in my Slack channel for my class. So there's a fair amount of free space. And because it's on a tweet, it's actually taking up less space than if I had uploaded images of those gloves.
Okay, thank you.
Right now, I'm going to focus mostly on the virtues, since some of the virtues may not apply to your class and you may not actually want to learn anything more about Slack when I'm done with this. But if there are things that are more specific that we don't get to that you want to talk about, I'm happy to do that after. So the other thing I wanted to mention just about the familiarity of it is that you can leave room for more informal conversation. And one of my favorite things about the Slack is that I can have a channel for memes where students can post stuff they find but it's limited to this single channel. So instead of, always talking about movies about Hamlet, we have this one little space where students feel like they can post. So Michael in my class and I had this long conversation about Arnold Schwarzenegger the other day. And you can see a lot of the fun features of Slack that in some ways you might find too informal and not really appropriate for an academic setting. And so those are things that I have struggled with a little on my own, but I have, you have emojis and things like that. And that's a way of having an affective response to student commentary. And sometimes you might not feel that's appropriate, or you might not feel comfortable doing that. But what I've found is it actually allows you to recognize your students and say, hey, I see you, I hear you. But also you don't spend a lot of time on it. So I've come around to the emoji. The other thing is these are immediate things where you can respond. You can see I responded 3 minutes after Michael, but there's my emojis. On the other side, on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that Lex and Alex are talking to each other about memes that Lex has posted, and those came 6 days ago. And I didn't notice them because the memes channel, I'm not always checking to see if there's something good there. But when I finally did, I got to respond still. So the nice thing about it is that it doesn't go away and doesn't get buried. You can still find when things are new to you. And I circled down there the little Shakespeare. It's not just the regular suite of emojis. You can have custom emojis in your Slack. And so sometimes that's, I've added a bunch of little Shakespeare faces that I keep posting, and I enjoy them. The other thing is when somebody does emoji, you can find out who did it and by just mousing over. So the immediate part is the best part, and you can see, and when we'll try Slack out in a second, or actually several minutes, you'll see that it tells you when someone's typing. And that's, I think, the best part of it for synchronous communication. So I have a class right now that meets in person, but I have probably 4 to 6 people that are regularly meeting us online. And I know a lot of people are doing that dual Zoom where you have Zoom in the classroom and you have Zoom at home. I do that in my Spanish class. I sometimes will do that in the class I teach. But a lot of the time I'll just say, okay, for the next 10 minutes, you guys are going to chat in this channel about anything that has to pertain to this. And you have 10 minutes. And so the people at home are talking to the people in the room, and nobody knows the difference because they're all talking to each other in this platform. It works really well, I find, to close the gap or close the distance. But as I said before, is also ongoing. So people are typing in the minute. It's better than class discussion in person in some fashion because everybody can type at once. I find more people participate rather than the ones that always talk out loud in class. So everybody types, and it can be chaotic, but the nice thing about it is that it's going to be there later. So you don't have to acknowledge everybody's comments in the moment, but you can actually respond to it at a different point when you have a better way to respond. Because I think everybody knows what it's like when someone says something in class, you feel the need to validate that they tried, but it's not the right answer. It's not a good answer. Maybe it's a problematic answer, and you need to have a sensitive kind of careful thinking before you actually say something that might accidentally validate it or be too harsh. And so the Slack has given me that opportunity. And then times where students post something that I just am like, okay, fine. I can always give them a thumbs up in the emojis and not really engage, where they still feel seen and heard. You've acknowledged that they're there, but you aren't necessarily spending a lot of time doing it. So I think it does actually have some benefits. I think this is the other, I was pointing out the immediate and ongoing element. So you can always come back and find stuff. The other thing is the way that it comes out is very organized. So unlike something like GroupMe where students are chatting and chatting and chatting, but after they're having their initial conversation, the stuff they said earlier or 2 days ago goes away. Slack is organized with a main channel. So you have the series of channels that are all down the left-hand side. Those will open in the immediate window. And then in addition to the main channel, everything can be replied to start a thread. And that's where you can have actually decent organized conversations. You can respond to a specific thing that someone said, or you can respond in general in the channel. So it's one of the things that I think takes a little bit of time to work on, you know, with students in particular, because they're always like, well, where do I put this? You know, or some of them just start posting and you say, no, there's a channel for that. Go over there. And you'll see it in the test Slack that I set up. Everybody was posting in the general, and I had a channel for introductions, and I was like, no, post there. So, you know, you have to be comfortable with a certain amount of freedom on the part of anyone to post wherever they think it's relevant. But it's still actually easy to tell what people are trying to respond to. So that's the list of channels. And again, those are very easy to create. These are the main responses in the main channel. And then this thread over here is pulling out everybody's responses to Hannah's comments. And I see that as being a big virtue. I think threading comments really does make it better than GroupMe, and I think even Blackboard, which has a structure and system, but again, it's like nobody wants to open all those different windows. This is all out in the same place. It's one click to get to the new thread.
Vim, quick question. Can students upload video, like if they want, audio, like if they wanted to record themselves making a comment, is there a way for them to do that?
Yes, they could do that. And I think because of accessibility, you might, I mean, there are lots of different issues to think about in terms of what format they're uploading in. But yeah, they have the power to upload anything. And that's good and bad, right? Because again, if once you are allowing them to be in this environment, they can put stuff on there, and you have to have maybe a plan or a protocol for removing things. Okay.
Question for you. Can you create subthreads under the thread?
No, that's the one thing. Once it's in a thread, then it's a single thread.
So if you've got, say, you'd have a thread for the class, you might have a thread for a particular group within the class, or particular topics if people were working in smaller teams.
Yeah, so it really depends. You have to think through what your pedagogical goal is and what you want them to be discussing. But again, that's in some ways that's more specific and fine-tuned to anyone's individual class and purposes than at least right now I'm trying to get into. But when we try it out as a group, you can see like how you might start to lay out your channels versus comments, posts, and threads.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to now switch to Google Docs, which unlike Slack is something that I've been using in my teaching for a really long time. And I knew that once I was assigned an in-person class that I would be using Google Docs a lot, because I do a lot of group work in my classes and group projects. And when I figured out students weren't going to be able to be next to each other working, it just seemed like a no-brainer that you would want them to have access to shared documents that are edited in real time. So they're not sending each other different versions of the same document in Microsoft Word and then not knowing which is the most recent version. Everybody has the same exact text. So I knew that it would work for group work with social distancing. I think what I hadn't quite figured out until I did it in the spring is how I could use it with Zoom. So one of the things that I think is really useful, you know, everybody likes the breakout room feature in Zoom. You can coordinate your breakout rooms with group Google Docs so that they might be talking to each other in the Zoom breakout room, but who's keeping track of what they're talking about? And I think one of the virtues and maybe negative aspects of Google Docs is that it allows you to kind of keep track of what they're doing, who's doing what, who's saying what, who's doing the work. But for me, the nice thing is it's always been that when students are having a discussion, somebody can take notes two people can take notes, and then there's like a record of what the conversation was about. Students can go back to it when they need to study for their exams. And so it's really just a way to crowdsource things. And so I wanted to be able to see what all my students are doing in those breakout rooms. I don't want to keep interrupting their flow by going in and out of the breakout rooms. So I just open up all their Google Docs while they're in the breakout room, and I just watch what they're all doing and typing. And it's actually a really nice way to say, oh yeah, they're doing it. They're doing the work. And then when you bring everybody together, and some of them are reluctant to talk, you can say, hey, I saw in your Google Doc you were talking about this. Do you want to say more now for everyone? I also use the Google Slides, and that has been really great for having my students give these very impromptu presentations to the full class when they're ready to share what they've been talking about in their breakout group. Google Docs is also very immediate in that everybody is editing in real time, and it's ongoing because, again, everything is preserved in the document and can be revisited at a later time. And this makes it better than having everyone take their own individual notes because everybody can contribute to it. And it retains the history of the document. So if somebody deletes something accidentally, you can always get it back. It also retains attribution. So if a student adds a comment that might be inappropriate, you know who did it. You can always react that way. And then it also, I think, gives a sense of student agency. And I don't like the sort of surveillance angle on it, but it does allow you to go in and say who contributed to this document, and you can see who typed what. So I'm going to show you for the period we have before we start doing practical things like playing around in them. I'll just show you 4 examples of things that I have used these tools for. And this is just the Google Suite because I think the Slack, the bottom line is the Slack, we just use it to discuss stuff, discussion and share. For Google Docs, I have much more, I think I have more substantial goals for using it. And I think it's just in general something that is a more sustainable tool than Slack might be. But the first is to crowdsource notes, which I've mentioned before. And so I might say to students, okay, what did everybody learn from the reading? And we open up a shared Google Doc. Everybody goes in and starts typing. It's total chaos and wonderful in that regard. I look at it as like, this is the chaos of learning. Everybody's saying what they learned, and it's sort of exciting to me. But then you have this big long list that's a mess, and then you can go through and say, okay, it looks like 4 of you mentioned this. Let's talk more about that. And it does mean that rather than I'm in charge choosing the things that I want to highlight, they have contributed to this document in a way that allows us to say, this is what you want to talk about. And so I usually will set up one document and have everybody write in it. So that happens. I'll show you one example that sort of shows that. It works well for remote learning. It works well in person. And it also works when you have some people in the room and some people at home. The other example that I'll show you is, it actually includes the first thing, but I've done longer group projects in my writing studies and composition course, where basically I divide my class in half. They choose whether they want to work on one of 2 topics that we've been studying the whole semester. And as 2 groups, they have to put together a research paper that they write. And so basically all I do is set up 2 Google folders for them and say, all right, whatever you want to do in here is great. Figure it out, use it to share. At the end of this 4-week period, you're going to have a draft of your paper. And so I'll show you what that looks like. The third example is that I set up slides in shared Google folders. I asked students to work together to discuss some passages from Othello. And from those passages, they have to basically prepare 3 or 4 slides. And then when we're back together on Zoom, they have to share their slides with everybody using the screen share. Or instead of using the screen share, everyone in the class just opens up their Google Doc, and that way they can see the slides, but they can also keep all the pictures of everybody in the class and have a discussion in the side of their computer. So rather than commandeer their screen the way I'm commandeering my screen now, you give them some freedom to access the material, but also see each other. finally, the last thing that I'll show you is a transcription exercise that I did. One of the things in my class that I'm trying to do is show students what it means to be a Shakespeare scholar. And for me, that means looking at archival documents that are really difficult to read. And so I have them do a transcription exercise where they have to figure out what this guy has written in a letter about the poem Venus and Adonis. And because I had students in the room doing this exercise, they were all working in the same Google Doc. And then I had students at home who were looking at a different Google Doc with the same assignment. And I have a video of them working together. So I'll show you that so you can see how they use Google Docs and Zoom at the same time. So with that, those are my 4 examples. I'm going to stop sharing this presentation and bring you into my Google Drive. Okay. All right. So actually the first thing I'll show you is the WSC assignment where my students wrote 2 papers on 2 different issues. I had one group working on adjuncts on campus and another group working on the use of student data. And you'll see that these 2 groups used their Google suite of tools very differently. So the adjunct group created quite an elaborate system of files. And this is a group of students from 2014. Normally I wouldn't show you anything with their names. These guys are long gone, so I hope that's okay. You can see they use Google Forms to do a survey. Here are their survey responses. Here's a little list of things they did already. And then in this outline folder, they actually have a whole bunch of other stuff. So it's a really amazing document that shows me all the stuff that they were all doing the entire semester. They compiled this collective bibliography. And so with this, I can show you how Google Docs keeps track of updates to documents. If you've never used this feature before, if you click on it says this last edit was made. If you click on this, it gives you the version history, and it gives you a detailed explanation of who added what with a timestamp, and it will take you through bit by bit what each student did. You notice up here it says restore this version, which means if somebody accidentally deletes everything, you just click on the last version and you can restore everything. So I think that's a really valuable thing that Google Docs does. It lets you see like, gosh, my students are really doing all this stuff together. It's great. This is the adjunct group, but if you compare to the data group, this is actually kind of funny, I think. They have one document, and there's a couple of reasons for this, but if you look at what they did in the document, rather than create several documents and use several different tools, they basically did everything in a single document. And here too, I could look to see who did what by clicking on the version history. But the thing that's so great about this is that they were studying the use of student data and applications like Blackboard and Google. And they decided collectively that they didn't really want a lot of stuff in Google because they don't like how Google handles their privacy and their data. So they stopped using it and started doing things old school. Like they actually had hard copies of the paper that they came and they asked me to make copies for everybody in their group. And so it's kind of funny. I was very glad to see that they were that conscious of what they were up to. So that's the group project that I did. And you can see basically how easy it is. Just you set up folders and let them do what they want. I also have set up more, I guess, instructor-centered assignments where I have had a goal in mind of what I want them to look at. So I'll set up like this. This is my slideshow, and every group that is working on Othello in my class, there's 4 groups. They all have to do a couple different tasks. So I'll set up a slide that looks like this with passages they have to read. I'll give them some shapes and say you can copy and paste those shapes to highlight passages. And so then they basically go through and they highlight things, they write some notes. So their notes are in this document. And then once they've finished working together as a group and compiled notes, then they have a little slideshow. And so when it's time for us to come back together as a group, they just hit share. Either, again, screen sharing on Zoom, or we say, everybody go into the Google slide for group one. And that way people don't have to waste the bandwidth by being in Zoom. They can follow along. And so it's preserving some of the work they do in groups and also making them focused. And I think you'll see that in the final example I have. So this is the transcription exercise that I mentioned. Let's see. So one of the things that I work on is paleography, and I wanted to give my students a little sense of just how difficult it can be to read old handwriting. I give them a little paleography guide, so I don't just try to, force them to read this without having some sense of what kinds of, what letters look like. But basically I have all of these in a document. I had 2 documents, and my students at home worked on one by themselves while everyone in the classroom worked on theirs. And I will show you now the video of that, which I find pretty charming. They're super excited and they're super smart. And so I asked for their permission, but we blanked. Alex helped me so that I could share this video.
Don't even look at number 3. Oh my gosh.
The last word is Venus. Yeah, in case you guys didn't know. Okay.
Oh, and of something of a Venus for number 3.
First word looks like werewolf.
It does. It really does.
Maybe it's
Oh my god.
where unto. No, is that a word?
There, maybe?
Oh,
There is another book.
Oh, yeah. Because it's the exact same as the end of another.
Oh, I hate that. Why would you write it like that?
It's just there without the last E.
It's like
Why
share
would
with
you do
the
that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so I think that curl that looks like it could be an O is actually just part of the W, maybe.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think that's what it is.
So WHORIN,
H?
Or
Where's
word?
the H?
Wait, where's the H?
like that long loop
Oh, it
thing.
could be an H.
Yeah, that's an
Oh.
H. That is
Oh, that
an H.
is an H.
Maybe
Where
it's
in?
W.
It's
Wait.
wherein.
wherein.
Wherein?
Smart
Oh my
guys.
god, we actually did it.
Virtual
Absolutely
high fives,
not.
everybody.
Heck yeah. Hell yeah.
Okay, and we
We
got
have 1 through 3.
Woo!
I don't even want to look
I
at it.
didn't realize this goes up to 18.
What?
Yeah, there's 18 total.
Oh my god, look at the last one. It's horrible.
Is the next letter a U? Like Queen? Queen
Yeah.
in great love.
Yeah, it does look like 2 E's.
Oh my god, it actually says Queen.
Yeah,
like-
but
it looks
instead
like
of a U, it's a
queen.
W.
Yeah.
So it's
Which
like
queen is-
QWEENE.
Is it a
Yeah,
W?
which is in great love.
Forsooth. Who's typing this?
No, I can't. Hang on.
Okay.
Ah. Is it like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, baby. That's how I spell queen from now on.
Yeah, I thought the first letter was a D.
I think capital D looks right,
Yeah.
potentially.
No, I think you're right.
Death. What's the third letter?
That's a S. If you look in the lowercase, the third one in.
Okay, I believe you.
IRES.
Desires to kiss him?
Yes!
Damn.
Yes,
No.
right.
Damn.
Playing Wheel of Fortune. Right?
MVP.
I'd like to solve.
Word.
That's an A though, right? Desires.
Which?
In 6. Like, I'm just trying to type it up.
I don't know.
Just checking in, seeing how you guys are doing.
Ladies.
We're doing lusty and fresh.
Okay, so that gives you a good idea. Because they have somebody asked in the chat what they're looking at, and they're in the Google Doc, working in the Google Doc together. And so what they're looking at is the assignment that they're supposed to be doing. And you can see, you know, they're remote. They could just be messing around at home, but they're not. And they didn't know I was videotaping. They forgot that my Zoom is set to automatically film, and I didn't, you know, obviously they did not think it was filming them because they swore a lot in the middle. And that was actually also enjoyable to watch. But they're super, super focused. And because they have the Google Doc guiding them, they don't divert from their purpose almost at all, except to joke around with each other. And so that's the kind of work that they can do. And in that video, I don't know if you could tell, but I was occasionally going back to my computer, and what I was looking at myself is what the students in the room were doing in their Google Doc, and then going back to what the students outside the room were doing in their Google Doc. And frankly, the ones outside, the remote students that you just saw, they were getting through that document. They were laughing because they were 18. They were actually on number 12, like that. The students in the room who were trying to talk to each other across the room and yelling in their masks did not get that far, comparatively speaking. They did not have nearly the amount of fun that the students at home had. So I really enjoyed that kind of exercise, and you can do that with any kind of task that you want students to do together. Someone who I got 2 emails requesting access to the Google Doc. So this is what I mean. You're trying to access it outside of the Hofstra portal, and you really need to make students use the portal, because again, Google can't handle it when you have multiple Google accounts. So you go into the portal, go to the waffle menu, access Google Docs from there, and that's how you'll find the shared with me. What I'm gonna do, and you know, we're a little close to 4 o'clock. We got started just a tad bit late. If anyone has to go at 4, that's totally fine. But anyone who can stay a little longer, we can continue. I'll put you into breakout rooms right now. And I will say, just with confirming, Liz, I think there are some things about Google, the integration of Hofstra's Google Drives, that make it a little less than easy. And I have had 1 or 2 students that it's always like, I don't know where the Google Doc is, I can't find it. And so anytime you are planning on using it a lot, I think the first couple days of the semester is really good to just have everybody in the same folder and just devote some class time to making sure everyone has access to the documents. I am going to put people in breakout rooms right now. And if you didn't get into the Google folder, don't go to a breakout room, just stay here. But basically your instructions are to access that Google folder, the Google Slack workshop. There are documents labeled group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. I'll put you in 4 breakout rooms. When you are in breakout room 1, go to Google Doc group 1, right? Your breakout room 2, go to group 2 Google Doc. Same thing for 3 and 4. And that, I do that in groups just because it's so many people. You need fewer people to collaborate. There's a discussion prompt in there. You can follow the prompt. You don't have to follow the prompt. I'll give you 5 minutes to play around in there. Usually 5 minutes is not enough time. It takes everybody a little time to get to the right place. But anyone who didn't get into the Google Drive or can't find it, just stay here, okay? I'm about to put you into 4 rooms.
Vim, one thing I've done with Google Docs, and I don't know if you've ever done this, is sometimes I'll take a text that we're working with and I put the text in a Google Doc.
Oh, well.
But then I have the students use the comment feature, right? So like they're annotating the text instead, you know, and I find that to be pretty useful also.
How did everybody's time go?
Challenging.
Yeah. What's the main source of difficulty, do you think?
Well, not knowing enough, I guess. And on the document, how would I type feedback on a document that the student had put there, and they would know that it was my comment as opposed to them editing it? Like how would I, let's say, put my comments in red, let's say in the margin or something like that, or blue, or.
Basically, I'll just show you quickly. If you designate like a color of text that you're going to use, so you can always do that. I do something like this. This is a great point, and then I'll put my initials. Either I can highlight it or I can make it a different color. But the better way, I think, and Rosemary was just talking about this, is you can highlight what you want, hit insert, and then there's a insert comment. So type your comment.
And where does the comment go?
On the side.
Oh,
Students have the option to resolve a comment. So if you're commenting on a draft or something and you're telling them there's a typo there or grammar or something, they can actually fix it and then click resolve. And so they have this sort of ability to say, I saw your comment, I fixed it.
so there's that. Could you show that button again on the sidebar to where you made the comments that were not in the text itself?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of that happens in the insert menu. So all the way down is insert comment.
Got it. And then it comes up on the sidebar.
Yep.
Know what? It does or it doesn't?
Yes,
Yeah.
it does.
And it works a lot like Microsoft Word commenting. I don't think
Let's say.
it's as effective as Word commenting. So, I don't recommend everybody switch over entirely to Google Docs. I think it's not as good for other things, but I like it for the shared element, and you can see the chaos of everyone typing at once. But I think, again, I sometimes get really charged by that. Like, look at everybody going, everybody's got something to contribute. Yeah, Kathleen?
I was just wondering, so if the students use one of those documents and they kind of make notes on it while they're in the breakout room, and then they want to make a slide, like you were talking about having students work on something together and then they could make a slide to do a presentation to the class. Is it better, or do they figure it out themselves, to kind of take their notes and put them on slides from the very beginning? Or how do they go from the notes that they have maybe collected just on a Google Doc, almost like a Word doc, and then make a slide from it so that they can bring their discussion to the class? Is that pretty straightforward for them?
Well, I think going in, you have to design.
You set it up as a slide. Okay.
I set
Got it.
some stuff up as a doc that's sort of more freewheeling, and then the stuff where I have like fairly controlled.
I see.
Especially if I only have like 25 minutes to devote to it. I don't want them to futz around and look for stuff. So I have everything in, the instructions are in slide 1. The things they're looking at are in slides 2 and 3. And then the third slide is, what's the take home? What's the insight you're going to share with us? And then I give them those little boxes and circles even. I just put those in the document and say, just cut and paste these. So they don't have to spend a lot of time learning how to use it.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Thanks.
Basically engineered something that's so carefully labored up front, then the next time I do it, I don't have to do almost any of that because they take to it. I mean, some of them are already using it, but it's always good when you first start to just kind of set the behaviors that you want to see for them, and then they follow through with them. Sometimes they get really anxious about it. It's like, do we do this? What are we allowed to do? And after a while, they just start to feel like, I can do whatever I want in this document. I'm just going to show everybody how we worked in a group. And so the comfort level increases really quickly, I think. Well, and if everyone has a little bit of time left, I understand, again, if you have to go, we can go ahead and try out some of the Slack features as well. And that can go very quickly. If you join the Slack already, you are already probably in there. And if you haven't, I will share my screen so you can see what it looks like and what happens. And I'll just ask, so now you all see the Slack. Oh, this is, wow. So yeah, okay. So this is our Slack, and I did not put a whole lot of channels in it. I put group 1, group 2, group 3, and I have these all posted as drafts, but if I were running a class where my students were about to talk, I would just move all these drafts to publish. I just post them all right before I put my students into breakout rooms. And then I would hit go. I would say, okay, if you're in group 1, and I would usually line those groups up in advance, tell them who's in what group. I don't usually use Slack with Zoom at the same time. I usually use it as an alternative. So if you don't mind, someone who is in the Slack who's here now, go ahead and type in any of the groups. You can, okay, there's Michael. You can see at the bottom, it says Ethnalay is typing, Ethnalay and GPEL typing. So you can see how easy it is for people to start talking. And then if I wanted to reply to Michael specifically, then I go over here and reply in thread and say, hi. Right, and I can add an emoji if I want. Just add my Hofstra emoji since I made it custom, and then hit send. And so you can see now it's a thread over here. And the beauty of the Slack is that everybody can type at once, but it's also organized because you're talking in a specific place, specific channel, which as a professor you can set as a specific function. Usually I leave my groups as just groups for any day that I want people to discuss a whole bunch of different stuff. But you can make a specific channel that's dedicated, like I did, you know, anybody posting about Desdemona, post in the Desdemona channel. Once we're not studying Hamlet anymore, it becomes the Gertrude channel, post about Gertrude. I also have a channel for practice posting media, just so you can get the feeling of what it's like to post live links. And so, as I mentioned before, you know, you don't necessarily want to send your student to YouTube where they'll get distracted, but you can send them to YouTube within the Slack. So Ethna has just posted this this video, and there are also other things to post. You can post tweets and blog posts and anything like that. I've turned my notifications off, but normally you guys might all be hearing that little dot 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 noise that indicates that somebody is typing. So occasionally I'll be away from my class Slack and I'll hear those beautiful sounds and I'll know somebody's working or somebody's typing. And the other thing is that the channels, when there are new posts, will be highlighted or bold. So you can always tell when someone's put something new in there. And I don't get Hofstra email on my cell phone, but I have my Slack on my cell phone. And so my students, if they need something, they know to post a question on the Slack rather than send me an email over a weekend, because they know I'll check the Slack regularly in a way that I will try to stay away from my email. So I don't know, do anyone have questions about Slack and using Slack?
I just put a question in the chat. You had talked earlier about bringing the external into chat, and then you said you didn't go to Twitter, for example, with tweets, but
right. So that
videos seem like a bigger thing. Usually they take up more space and stuff. So I just wondered.
Yeah, if you click on that video, it'll start playing right away. There are some, if you click on one part of the link, it'll say that it's disabled. So you have to click on there's multiple links when you post to YouTube, but the video will play right there. And I mean, at that point, then you do get the ability to go to YouTube and look at other things. But it's all controlled in your settings too. You can also set it so that stuff doesn't open up, unfold.
So if I wanted to talk, like I went into group 1 and did some typing, but if I wanted to be involved in this chat right now that everybody's sending back and forth, I would go into the general.
You would go wherever you see people typing. So whatever conversation you want to participate in.
I'm not, when I go into general, I see people.
Uh-huh.
And then group 1 is, I see different people, and group 2, I see a couple of people or whatever. But I'm not sure what, if I wanted everybody to see, you know, like help, I need whatever.
Yeah.
Where would I type when
Well,
you say chat?
That's a good question. I think as an instructor, when I set my Slack up, one thing I knew I needed to have was a questions channel that made it very clear if anyone had a question that I should answer, that it would go in that particular channel. And that way I could say, I made sure that I've answered all the questions. Because in the threads, you know, lots of questions come up, but I don't always know that they're questions for me. They might be questions students are just asking each other. So I think as a instructor, if you're using this, the first thing you need to do is think through what is your student going to want to have on there. And one thing is a very clear spot to ask a question. But if you want to know where to go in terms of who to discuss with, again, that can also be clarified as a pedagogical purpose. So I break the groups into, you know, like four groups, mostly because you don't want 20 people just kind of all talking at once sometimes. So I might have them all answer the same exact question, but they'll post in different group channels just to kind of make it so it's only 4 or 5 people talking to each other. But then I'll say, okay, now you've talked in your channel, everybody in group 1, go look at what group 2 wrote and respond. And everyone in group 2 go to look at what group 3 wrote and respond. So you can open it up and
it doesn't get flagged, like if there's something like with email or something, you know, or chatting on the bottom of the Zoom screen, you see there's a red icon that says there are 2 new chats or whatever. How do you know that somebody's added a question to this?
Well, it'll come up as a new post. And usually Slack tells you in the navigation where the new posts are by giving you like boldface type. So on the list of channels, let's share this again. On the list of channels, I know that there are new posts that I haven't read in the practice posting media because it's in boldface type.
Got it.
On that, it opens up the screen. And I know that there's going to be stuff here that I haven't seen, like this excellent picture of the dog. And I almost always do the most literal emoji possible. When someone posts a dog, I always put a dog emoji. And then you can see there are DMs as well. And
where are the emojis?
At the bottom of a post.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So there's 2 places you can emoji. You can emoji just in the regular, like this window here where I'm replying. I can be in here and it'll be big. So it's dog. And now I have a dog. Or I could put a dog in response to this post, in which case, again, I go over to the side and this little thing pops up. And then I add my dog to Peg's post specifically. So can
I ask a pedagogy type question? So when you have these different groups, do you sometimes make them so that they can't go? Like, can you hide channels if you want them to only be able to go to a particular group and then unhide it, or I don't know, whatever, you know, like, you know, how when you put them in breakout rooms, they're in breakout rooms and sometimes you want them to be those specific groups.
Right.
The way it's set up right now, it looks like you can sort of go to whatever channel is in that list, right?
Those are all public channels, but when you set up a channel, you have the option to make them limited to certain people. So here's the channel add channels. I'm going to create a channel and you see this here, make private. So I would check that box off and this would be students in need or whatever. And then I could make this a private channel and then it's private and it really is only going to be accessible to the people that I immediately set up. So it says add people. See the pop-up, right?
Yeah, I see that. Okay.
So if I wanted, if you were my student in need, Kathleen, I would add all the.
I'm in need.
that I think need to be as part of this channel, I would add it. And then no other student will be able to see that. And you see it's up here locked.
Oh, I see. Okay, thanks.
And
Do you think that is useful at all? Or do you prefer to have them all public from a pedagogical point of view?
I haven't had private channels, in part just because I'm afraid that if I did, I would post something thinking it was private and it wasn't. And I feel very like nervous about the DM feature as well. There are direct messages down at the bottom in Slack, and you can DM anyone. And I think Tony said when he joined Slack, Slack encouraged him to DM Warren. And so Slack is asking you guys to like talk, have a back channel. And I'm fine with my students DMing each other, but every time I DM one, I always think, is this DMing? Am I DMing? Is this going to post publicly? So I think the more opportunities I have to post something that I don't want to share to everybody, I don't want more of those. I want fewer of those. But I could see definitely, so that was a private channel. There's also a way to just, when you add people to the channel, you would just add the people you want in that channel. And it doesn't mean that others can't get to that channel. It just means that they aren't in the channel when you're doing whatever activity you're doing. And so later, you might have seen in this, so with the channels, there's the this button here. It says browse channels and create a channel. So if I were setting this up for my class, I would make most of my channels public, and then maybe I realize people really love Mad Men and want to talk about Mad Men. I might create a channel for people just to talk about TV. And some of my students hate TV. So rather than bog them down with lots of communication about television, I would set up a TV channel and then it would be optional. And if students wanted to join it, they could. And if they didn't want to join it, they didn't have to. And the channel browser lets them see what other channels are available to them. So the way I have the Slack set up for the test is that everybody has access to everything. But I could have created just a like TV junkie channel and invited people who I know like TV. And then later, 2 weeks later, you're on the Slack and you start thinking, what other channels are on here? You could look for what channels are on here and then see there's a TV channel and say, oh, all these people have been talking about TV without me. I'm going to join that channel. But
So you have the option of joining whatever channel you want, basically?
Yeah.
Unless it's made private.
Unless it's made private. And the way I set my Slacks up for, or the Slack for my class is I invite everybody. I set up a channel and say, when anyone joins the Slack, they immediately are joined to the channel. And that way nobody gets left out. You don't have a student saying, I didn't know there's a channel. You know, everybody has access to everything. But later, once you figure out purposes for channels in your class, it may be perfectly appropriate to set up channels that not everybody sees. So I think there are 2 levels of functionality that help with that. I don't use them, but you could.
How do you know, like if you have, you're teaching 3 classes or 5 classes, different sections, let's say, how do you separate the sections on that?
Well, for me, what I would do is set up 3 separate Slacks probably, and have one for each class. On the left-hand side of my screen, can you see where I'm arrowing?
Yeah.
I have
the icons.
So this one is my Shakespeare class Slack. This one here is Slack I'm on with a bunch of different scholars. This one is my friend Slack, where my friends and I hang out and talk. And then this is the test Slack that we're in right now. To add a new workspace, you
add workspace, right?
Yeah. So you can set up any number of workspaces on Slack, just add the ones for each class. But Alex and I were talking about the possibility, because one of the things you can't do on Blackboard is if you're teaching 2 sections of the same class, because of FERPA and I guess other reasons, you can't really have all your students from one section talk to the students in your other section. Blackboard doesn't allow you to invite both classes in, but you could set up a Slack for both classes that would allow all your students to congregate and ask questions and work together and talk. So
why wouldn't somebody make the same FERPA objection to that they do to Blackboard?
Well, there would be the same FERPA objection. So Alex and I were
Don't
talking.
tell anybody.
I mean, I think it's one of those things where, and Slack isn't supported by Hofstra, and it's third-party software. And I think anytime you use third-party stuff, it's always an issue about their data and their privacy and what you're forcing them to use an account for. And I hate making students make accounts that are not supported. But in this case, like I said, I think because of the pandemic, there are some things that I understand as in context being okay that I might not think overall systematically or programmatically are okay. But like as a professor, you know, if like during Hurricane Sandy, you know, here's a thing, anyone who wants support can come to this thing and I will be there and talk to you and help you or whatever. So I think you can think of uses where it would be helpful. Alex,
Does Hofstra have a problem with this at all? I mean, what's Hofstra's attitude towards Slack?
Alex,
It's so new and so underutilized that there is no official opinion on it. But EdTech as a department strongly urges you to look into it. Just like if you have thoughts of using it the way Vim is, and we look how fantastic it is. I mean, there's nothing in Blackboard that can substitute for the kind of immediate interactivity you can have in a discussion. So the FERPA thing, yeah, I mean, that's one thing. But if you're just talking about internal to a class, as long as you're okay with having your students sign up for a third-party product, which there are several precedents for that, right? I mean, there's a lot of tools we don't own, and we tell you, hey, you want Flipgrid? Go create a Flipgrid account, or what, you know, 20 other tools, because we can't have accounts for everything. But it's amazing what you get for free, right? This is because we have the paid version, we use it in IT internally, and the only real difference, honestly, is that the paid version maintains your communications for like years on end. So if you want to look back, well, what was the conversation a year ago? It's not an issue for a 3-month class, right? I mean, if you're going to run the course for 3 months, you're probably good, you know, if that gets wiped afterward. And you could always take screenshots if you need to.
I signed up for, well, I have this window, you know, you told us to open and all that, which I did, but for whatever reason, I don't see an icon on my desktop.
Well, you probably haven't created other Slack task groups or whatever they're called, but the ones that Vim was showing us are the ones that she's created in her account. She was showing us her page, not yours.
Yeah, but
Right.
what my thing is how come when I opened an account, so to speak, it didn't bring me an icon on my screen.
like, I think the difference is you can use, there's a web version, which you may be on the web version. That's just
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're talking about.
Downloading Slack as a desktop app is a second process. So sent to your email there, I sent a document to you before the desktop that has some instructions for setting up the desktop app.
Okay.
And I think I recommend the desktop app above the web. I think the web is easy and does everything. I mean, they're basically the same, but I like having a separate thing to pull up that doesn't feel like the internet. Like it feels much more like I'm in my class as opposed to I have, you know, I could go do all this other stuff and, you know.
So what do students tend to do? Do you know? Do they tend to download Slack as a separate app, or do they tend to use it through the web? Or does it, I mean, I guess from functionality point of view, it doesn't matter, but I'm just curious.
Mine that they download the desktop app, and I gave them the instructions, and I think they all did it. And some of them, when we talk on Slack in class, they have it on their phones and they use their phones. Which again, for this semester, I'm like, yay, cool. Normally I'd be like, oh my gosh, they're using their phones, you know? So I think what feels okay now is gonna shift in the future. I think that having it as a separate app is good, because then they can use whatever device they have handy. And again, you know that they're using it. You know, if they're on their phone and you're watching your Slack and typing, it's not like you're, you know, texting somebody else necessarily, because they're writing a message in your Slack. So the surveillance aspect that would normally creep me out is also something that I just love. I just think, oh, they're there they are.
Yeah. So when you said you could see typing before, so it depends on what channel you're in, right? You can see something that's happening when you're in that channel. You don't see what's happening in other channels if you're not in that channel, correct?
Right.
Okay.
You
just wanted to clarify that.
as soon as somebody's typing, that side in the channel lights up and gets bold-faced, so you know somebody's in there and can be tipped off in the channel.
Okay. This was great, Vim. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I interrupted somebody.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay. Vim, this was awesome. I love, you know, and I use Google Docs, but it's so great to see how other people are using it, and there's always something you learn. And I've never heard of Slack before. So that was neat. I have one very, you know, you're going to be like, why are you asking me? So how much of a learning curve do you feel there was for the students using Slack? Because from what I see, it seems really intuitive if you use social media. So like if I wanted to just send my students a message and try this out tomorrow for one class, right? Or try it out next Tuesday. Do you think it's worth it to just try it once? And even if I don't use it for the rest of the semester, like this late in the semester?
I would say, unless you plan on using it more than once, it's probably not worth it. Just because, again, even if it only takes them 5 or 10 minutes to get situated, then that's 5 or 10 minutes you probably could use in some other way. And again, it's like asking them to make a third-party account is just adding to the number of security vulnerabilities that they have.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think if you wanted to be able, so even if you only have a couple classes left, you know, we have this period between Thanksgiving and exam week. And actually, if you thought that it would be a great place for them to kind of converge whenever they needed access to you, then you could set it up and say, anyone who thinks they might want to have chats off Zoom can go here. And so then it would be worth setting up. It just kind of depends on, I would never try to use a technology for just one class, because students get very frustrated at the amount of stuff you have to do up front. And
I hear that.
I'll say I started using Slack maybe a month ago because of just election work I was doing, and all the campaigns use Slack as a way of communicating with team members and volunteers and stuff like that. And I have to say, I was nervous at first, but it was, I mean, there is a little bit of time just getting used to it and getting it set up, but it was very fast. I mean, I didn't understand all the things that you can do the way Vim was describing it, but it's not a huge curve at all.
No,
from that point of view.
You know, I'm looking at them. Some of the students who have more, you know, who've got issues with their technology are using the Zoom chat. That's not always very effective. And then there's no lasting record of it. You know, you've got them working in a Google Doc. Someone can't open it. And so I feel like it might be a kind of bridge of some sort for us to continue doing, not just like, let me throw this new technology at you this late in the semester, but really to try to get some of the students who are having more trouble engaging as actively to be more engaged with some of the other students. I find that things are working with Google Docs. I've used Padlet, and not all students have accounts with that. You can use it. And like if I have a Padlet, then someone else can comment anonymously and they can put like their group number or something like that. But you still can't have a conversation like you can have in Slack. And so anyway, I'll think about that. But thank you so much. This was really awesome. I appreciate you, putting this together, doing the work to put the slideshow together.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate everyone coming. I know that teaching has been so hard, period. And I don't know, just to have it wasn't always Zoom was good. And also just to like let my students be in a thing and
everybody froze.
It's like, you guys do this. I'm just gonna sit here.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. This was one of the best webinars. It was really, really great. Thumbs up.
Everybody. And
thank you.
Continue to use the Slack. I'll send everyone an email and say, if anybody wants to keep playing around, it's still there. We'll still use it.
I have one other quick question. Do you have to create a separate account for each? No, you don't, because you have all those workspaces, right? So you just keep adding workspaces to whatever Slack you have. I see. Okay, got it.
Those accounts are associated with 2 different emails too. So I think I was able to integrate and have everything all in one place, even though I have 2 different email addresses associated. So
That's interesting.
not-
Because I have like 3 different ones with all these different campaigns that I worked on, and I don't really know how they're related to one another, but I'm gonna play around with that. Thanks.
Thanks. Awesome, Vim. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Good luck.
Bye. Thanks again.
Bye. Thank
Take
you
it
very
easy and
much,
take
Vim.
care.